the academy, I will maybe focus more on the specialization process. For example, those last year, we have seen reinforcement of the kind of Erasmus exchange. So when I entered the military academy 25 years ago, there was no exchange at all. And what we have seen is really each year an increasing number of our military cadets who are going to other military university, like West Point, France, defense, of course. So I think it's really important for them to interact with other cadets because, like I said earlier, they will have to work in multinational setting and also to build what we call swift trust. So trust in a very rapid way because we are deployed in Belgium around four months. It depends on 6 months, but other countries are deploying their personnel much more longer. But I mean, it's an important thing to be able to collaborate. What I see as challenges is, of course, we have a lot of procedures. We have also a lot of training, also at NATO level, of course, a lot of big exercises. But what I see as challenges is maybe related also to the perception, the practices, working practices, and of course language. When I began my presentation, I was having a francophone French speaker. I was speaking a lot in Dutch, so I had Dutch words in my mind. I have to switch to English, and I mean it's not that easy. And when the level of risk is increasing, you are going back to your native language. I saw that in Kabul. Of course, I didn't stay a long time, but at one point there was something happening in the night, and there was some problem for reporting information between Dutch speakers and French speakers. Because as you see, if we look at our military organization, not everybody is officer. It's a minority, so the majority of our personnel are volunteer or are not bilingual at all, except for some people. And I think language is also a main obstacle, even if we are speaking English at a certain level. If we look at the operational level, we have a lot of people who are not able to speak English very well. So I think language can be an important dimension, and we have to work on it, and also to be aware of those dimensions. And also we tend to have a more emotional distance when we speak another language. So there are a lot of impact when we are interacting with people in a multinational setting. So I will maybe stop here, but thank you.
Okay, I different perspective, of course, but we see that indeed at the university there's a lot of international collaboration anyhow. If we now see that Europe is introducing EDF as a European Defence Fund, European Defence Agency, PESCO, Horizon will also implement some defence-related projects. So European and national will be certainly there. But also on the level of the committee, we have already contacts with universities in the Netherlands, in Sweden, in Switzerland, where they are setting up this type of committees and like also to think about defense and university interaction.
Well, I think NATO is all about interoperability, and so we have standard NATO agreements. These are minimal requirements in order to be able to work together to adapt to make sure that the Belgian doctor knows what the French is doing, how he is organized, and so we are already working a lot together. What we experience from a defense side is that often national interests are hindering this efficiency exercise, and so there always has to be an economical return on investment for the country, and that's really a big issue for us. That we could be more efficient if this would not always hinder the acquisition process. Yesterday and today I was sitting together at NATO HQ and at SHAPE with joint health departments of NATO, the Joint Health Group. So these are civilian counterparts, and so it was civilian and military together because we know that we have to work efficiently to face this crisis and to today we were also talking with the representatives from Europe, the ECHO, the Santé, in order to make sure that if we stockpile, that we do it in a reasonable way, that we know from each other who is stockpiling what, because it costs a lot of money. And so I think for the first time in history that we are sharing this information. So the Federal Health Department knows what we have in the amount of stockpiling. They know what we have to share this information, and that was not the case before. So we really are striving towards sufficient guidance.
So as academics, we work together very mostly on cybersecurity and cryptography. Last month I was giving a talk around cyber defense even. You might want to prefer to speak French, okay. But I think it gets more tricky when you already move to things which are economically closer. You see national economic interests. And also in, for example, the particular field of cryptography, the big member states prefer that the Americans make decisions rather than that Europe will do it. This is the alignment in the last 30 years. They rather have the US make a decision rather than having the EU and Brussels have too much power. It's very frustrating for us. I think now finally the climate is changing. And I think they're willing to give up some autonomy, but I think in general it's highly problematic. For operational military, I don't know too much because I don't have a clearance, so I don't know anything of what's happening in the world there. I know for intelligence, in intelligence there is no allies. To give you an example, you have probably read in this Norton document, if you haven't really read those documents, the GCHQ, the British Secret Service, has spied or hacked Elhacom, so our current Proximus, to actually get access to certain communications. So our own ally at that moment in the UK was part of the EU, part of NATO, they were hacking our telecom company to get access to some data they wanted to have. Similarly, we lucky meet in Germany, the CIA have bought a Swiss company that was making encryption devices and backdoored them for all their customers, so that they could read all these things. So in intelligence, there is no allies, and I think Europe will actually face this. I was very interested to see that von der Leyen announced the European Intelligence Service. It'll be very interesting to work there, because I guess nobody there trusts each other to achieve something together, but I'm not going to apply for the job there.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe staying a bit in the topic of collaboration, but also different interests and how that may clash. But I'm staying with you for the next question, which is posed, and that is how can we ensure proper coordination with private companies and governments? As they are becoming increasingly more influential and essential for national security. But at the same time, of course, there's issue also in terms of impeding civilian privacy, growth of innovation, and the role of private entities and private business. So, how can could they cooperate within this context of the cyber war, cyber protection, and how far could that go, and what are the challenges?
I think there is definitely cooperation. I mean, it's clear that this is going to require public-private partnership, and companies are working in defense. Of course, now that the budgets of defense are increasing, the companies are becoming more enthusiastic, of course. But I think there always had to be cooperation also for defending the civil parts of government. I mean, the government uses also cloud services. The government buys Cisco routers or uses telco services provided by the private sector. So I think there has to be a very close collaboration. I think the big challenge, of course, is that in Europe we depend for a large part on players from outside. We're very strongly dependent on the US technologies. Also, we have a lot of Chinese technologies in some areas. And Europe doesn't have enough big players in IT. We used to have them. There used to be Olivetti computers and Google computers. There was many of those, but I think they have not survived the scaling. And I think that what Russia and China have done, I mean, China more successfully, of course, than Russia, has built up their own IT industry. And I think this is a very delicate battle to be done, because it's very difficult to start competing, because it's an economy of scale. And so I do think that Europe has no other choice than work with the US companies and the European companies, and that member states have worked together very closely. But I think there is always this slight level of distrust, and it's not in my field in cybersecurity, but also for the Eurofighter, it's in France and Germany. I think it's going to be the same for technologies. So I thought that after the Snowden documents, we have cybersecurity made in Europe, but what I saw was cybersecurity made in Germany and cybersecurity made in France. And the Belgians would choose which one of the two they would buy. And of course, as a Belgian company, you can do your best, but you never get the same scale because the customer is much smaller, and so you actually very difficult time to scale. But I do think that the mentality has now changed, and hopefully Europe can move things. I mean, Airbus has worked, GSM is European technology, so maybe we wake up and we actually build European champions.
Thank you. I think the next question is posed to Ludo, but also to Anne to a certain extent, and it relates to biotechnology, which has been identified by NATO as a disruptive and emerging technology. So should we look more into dual-use research in terms of biotechnology? Should defense increase their support on all levels on biotechnology, but also what again would be the challenges related to this?
I think we will have to work together because, as I said, when circumscription was suspended, that also meant that we had very few academics doing their compulsory service, and so we really now have to look to universities to get things done in the biotech department. One of the big risks for medical services is, of course, the CBRNE threat, where we are especially afraid of the biological factor in it. And so we are now focusing on how can we rapidly detect that there's a new viral